I'm feeling low. Hey everybody, hope you're well, and it's James here over at the channel, and today we're privileged to have Joe Orlando on the channel. He is the new Krios COO, so he's the Chief Operating Officer. We've got, I think, as much time as we wish today. We've got loads of questions to ask Joe, but to start off with, first we're just going to get to know Joe a little bit better. Hey Joe, how you doing?
How are you, sir? Good afternoon.
Yeah, good. Whereabouts are you now, Joe?
I'm just north of Nashville, Tennessee at the current time.
Oh, okay. You into like, country music and all that, or?
Oh, no, no, no. Home for me is still Orlando, Florida, named after me. That's why my license plate says my town.
Oh, nice. I was actually in Orlando not so long ago. Went
Oh,
to,
beautiful, beautiful.
yeah, it was very nice. And then the love bugs were everywhere.
Yes, yes. I can tell what time of the year you were there.
Yeah, yeah. They said it's 2 times the year, and it was like little hives of stuff. It was crazy.
Yes,
Um,
yes, and they're everywhere and they get on everything.
Indeed. So we need to get to know you, Joe, a little bit better. So we're going to do the quick fire round. Going to throw some questions at you just to get to know you a little bit better. So,
My pleasure.
what's your favourite food?
Favorite food, Italian. I grew up Italian, Siciliano family, and they make the best tomato sauces and the best cheeses. And I've just gotten to where well, look at me. I wrap myself into Italian food.
And what's your favourite holiday destination?
Uh, fa- Nice, the Côte d'Azur, south of France. I enjoy going there once a year.
Excellent. And when you're not creating acquisitions, monster growth for companies, what's your favourite pastime?
I buy and build old cars, classic cars. We're talking the 40s and 50s and 60s that don't run, that don't look like much. And the challenge is, and it's like mathematics, if you get under the hood of the car and you're able to do A, B, C, and D, it should run. And if it didn't, you go back to look at A or B or C, but you get such great pleasure taking something that was broken and actually make it to where you got it nice enough that you can run it down the highway, go to a car show or take it out and about, and you're the one who fixed it. That's a great satisfaction.
Awesome. Now, you're sitting on the beach in Tahiti. What do you order? What's your drink of choice?
I'm sorry, I have to confess, it's a single malt 18-year-old Scotch that I have with my cigars.
Very nice, very nice. Well, thank you for that, Joe. It was just a quick round robin there, just to get to know you a little bit better. So, obviously, you now entering into the crypto space. What sort of experience and sort of what's your first impressions of the crypto space?
I've been actually watching and looking at the crypto space for a long time, not only just because of the blockchain technology, looking at the ways that that technology could be applied to other industries, like other exchanges, e-auction, et cetera, but also looking at it as a way in which to manage, I guess you would say, outside the banking system. We spend, for example, over $150 billion goes abroad from the U.S. every year. And all of that comes with some sort of tax or fee if it's using the normal route. That 150 going through cryptocurrency actually makes and saves money. So I've been actually looking at it now for 3 or 4 years, trying to determine other uses other than as an investment, but as a technology platform.
Okay. And have you got a little portfolio at all? Have you got any favorite coins?
No, I'm afraid I have stayed looking at Bitcoin, Bitcoin mining, but I have not jumped in up to my shoulders just yet because there's just so many options available. I'm trying to see who's doing what to whom at this point.
Okay. And what was the big attraction for Cryos?
To me, there's a I guess the best way to say it is a combination of the cryptocurrency. There's a I like the idea of moving back to the guild idea of the idea that we've got a lot of professionals that are seeking ways in which they can operate globally. There's always an issue about having to bill and collect globally. Krios allows you a way to skip that for a little bit and actually facilitates that for you to do business around the world. The other thing that gets to me is you actually have the marketing aspects, you've got the settlement aspects. So to me, another disruptive technology. I've spent my career introducing disruptive technologies, and I think this is another one.
Awesome. And obviously, Dwight very well. By the sounds of things, you guys are going to make quite a partnership.
He's brilliant. He's brilliant. I have worked with him for many years on a number of different projects. Technically astute, very brilliant. He's the kind of guy I bring a challenge to and say, help me fix this. And every time I get together with him, I walk away knowing something more.
Awesome. And do you operate at Dwight speed? Because
No,
that's
I don't know many people walk at Dwight speed. I'm one of those that has to take it in smaller bites at a time and say, I got it for now. I'll be back when I've digested this for the next segment.
awesome. Okay, so I know that he's come in and he's been a bit of a whirlwind with this project, and I think it's been really positive for the community, and we're just seeing the price creep up every day.
Yes.
Just very nice, organic. Lots of new people coming to the project, so I don't think it's going to be long before it'll get a bit more mass market appeal, and we'll be in that top 500, which isn't far off actually. So let's talk a bit more about what you've done and the experience that you bring to Krios, because obviously I've been reading through your CV, and it's quite impressive to say the least. I would probably say it's very blue chip, so sounds like you bring a lot of structure. But I'm going to let you talk through it. That was just my first sort of overview, if you will.
Well, I'll try to be brief, and I'm not always good at it. But I started out as an investment banker with Merrill Lynch. And as the youngest guy in the office, anybody who walked in the office that either came in speaking a foreign language, they would send to the kid in the corner. Anybody who came in who wasn't a $100 million deal, somebody who just wanted to raise $5, 10, or $50 million, they sent to the kid in the corner. So I built my reputation originally with companies that other folks may not have wanted to embrace. These are unknown technologies. These are technologies that were hard to explain, very complicated. But I would get involved with them and help figure out how I could take an idea, commercialize it. It may not have been the original idea. I'll give you a quick example. I had the Coen brothers come into me with piezoelectric technology. Back in, we're talking early 1980s. At the time, their idea was that they could use piezo technology in the mufflers of cars to generate electricity. Or they could take their piezo technology and make picket fences out of it to generate electricity for your car. For your house. That was all nice and good, but it wasn't a commercially viable idea. We spent a lot of time together, and we shifted it to where they were building now. They were being impact printers. From being able to make that shift, we were able to make a major player out of them, take them public, and raise a great deal of money and a great success for a little company. And that's how I started my career. Is I took a dozen or more of these small companies like LoJack, Memtech, and a list of others, and I brought them out to the public, as well as having some Fortune 20 companies. One of my early clients was Digital Equipment Corporation. They came to me because they didn't want Wall Street to know that we've invested all this money in this segment of the market. How do we quietly get rid of this piece of business? Well, I would take that business. I go find a group of investors who would buy that business from DEC, but they wouldn't necessarily make a huge fanfare out of it. Well, DEC is actually then comes to me later and says, we want to expand our markets. We want to build new technologies. And Digital Equipment Corporation at the time was the second largest computer manufacturer in the world, second only to IBM. People don't know who DEC is today, but at that time they were huge. But they appealed to me because they wanted to go buy technology. They realized that in order to jump ahead, they had to figure out, how do I go to new markets and not have the development time it requires to develop new technologies? So I joined them, strangely enough, as a finance guy who did not know what CPU stood for at the time. And they knew this. And I said, I don't understand what you want with a guy like me. But anyway, 6 years later, we had introduced a fault-tolerant VAX computer that we literally could shoot at, and you couldn't make the computer fail. It was redundancy throughout redundancy. We introduced enough product that we introduced another $3 billion of incremental revenue to Digital's bottom line over a course of 3 years. And that was really where I started kicking off in the technology realm.
Wow. I think I work for Mondelez, the craft. If you put $3 billion on their bottom line over 3 years, they'd be incredibly happy. Along with Warren Buffett and Nelson Peltz, like. That's impressive. So what happened? Obviously, that's an amazing achievement. So what happened next? 'Cause obviously you went to work for some quite big blue chip companies.
Yes. Well, I left DEC at a time in which they were starting to shrink in size, but I decided that all these products I had taken to market still had a value. So I created a value added reseller that we launched and continued then to use retired salesmen who were taking the package from DEC to continue to sell to the customers we already knew we had. And we built a reseller business out of that. Years later, I was purchased. The company was purchased from us, and I wound up with IBM. And at IBM, working with the Global Services Group Management Consulting, I had 2-year commitment to work with them. And I work with the likes of American Express, General Motors, Ford, Motorola, the list goes on. And my job was basically a talking head for the Chief Technology Office to go around and talk to customers about how technology can be used to leverage more business. It's not merely technology to be bought and put to work. It's a matter of if you bought technology and you use more than 30% of it, because most people only use that small amount, this is how much more you could reap. And that was my role, was to go around and help people understand this emerging space so that they could get involved. And this is early on with e-auctions from a sourcing standpoint. Early on with Salesforce automation. They weren't doing it in those days. So it was a matter of going out and evangelizing to these clients. These are the things that you could do if you just opened your mind. And that's what I was doing with IBM.
Awesome.
From there, I got recruited into Motorola. And Motorola says, every time you come in and you preach to us, we get all excited. We go off and get it started. And within 90 days after you leave, everything just kind of slows down. And we got tree huggers and people digging in their heels, and it just dies. You need to come back in and get us started again. And I did that several times. And then finally, they just said, forget this. We want to hire you to come in and make sure that the things you got us excited about come to fruition. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, well, you have a business card with no title. So you come in, and whether you want to go into R&D and generate revenue, whether you want to go into IT and trying to modernize our systems for e-auctions and sourcing, whatever it is you think that you could add value, come on in and see what you can do. And I thought that was a phenomenal opportunity. So I went in, reporting to the president, and I went in with ideas. I want to try this. I'd like to do that. What didn't fit in a pager or a cell phone from R&D, they'd put on the shelf. And I'd say, you just tens of dollars. Yes, but we don't have any use for it. It doesn't fit in a pager or a cell phone. I just saw low-hanging fruit. Let's go commercialize some of this R&D and license it and make some revenue. Well, that once you did a couple of those low-hanging fruit deals, it was easy for them to come back and say, what's your next idea? So for over the course of 2 years, introduced a lot of new technologies, a lot of new markets. We changed a lot of things at Motorola. They were a corporate brand, if you know what I mean. It was institutional. Businesses bought Motorola phones, not the soccer mom. So we had to change a lot of those things. And over time, we eventually decided that we wanted to build a beachhead in every home by using the set-top boxes, the set-top box you have for your cable, as a server that would allow me to run everything in your home. And therefore, we bought General Instrument for $10 billion. Well, once we consumed General Instrument, it was one of those where they said, okay, Joe, we're done. We have to digest this. We have no new technologies or new initiatives to pursue. We're going to have to do this for a while. And I said, okay. And I kind of sat back, and we had to figure out how to digest this General Instrument acquisition. In that period of time, PwC, which was one of my vendors, reached out to me and said, why don't you come to the UK? Because PwC was about to get rid of all of their implementation assets, the people who actually go down and do the coding, the integration work, the installation work, and they were fearful that all of their technology clients, like Nokia, like Schlumberger, like BT, would go away because they figure if we see that we're getting rid of all of their technology expertise, they won't come back to PwC for that. So I came to UK and built a team that would go out at the C-suite level to people like Nokia, BT, Schlumberger, Swiss Telecom, and the list goes on, so that we could strategically talk about developing and delivering new products, how we encroach on new markets, how do we build channels to market, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what I did with PwC for 4 years in the UK. When I came back, and I'm wrapping this up, when I came back from the UK, I was dealing a lot there with private equity clients. And when I left the UK, I had private equity clients like 3i and several others. I can't list all of them. But they said, now you're back in the US. Why don't you help some of our UK-centric technologies expand into the global marketplace, starting with the US? And I passively said, yes, I'll try that for a little while. Well, that was in 2004. Since 2004, the little company I started called Torchlight Group has now launched about 9 different technologies into the Americas markets. One of the neatest stories I have is a little point of sale company that was based out of Basingstoke, was a little known point of sale company. We brought them into the Americas. We changed their product portfolio. We changed their path to market. They actually beat IBM, Hewlett Packard, Dell, and several others in winning the Air Force Army exchange system globally. They won a major retailer here with 20,000 units. So they became a major player relatively quickly because they were able to change their mindset about looking at being a global player. And that's what I've been doing since 2004, is working with a lot of these private equity portfolio companies in terms of, how do I ensure that I don't die from too much growth? How do I ensure that I'm doing the right things for me to be successful? Those are the kinds of things I've been working on. Sorry, that was
No, it's good. No, it's really good to just understand all those things. And listening to that, what's been over the period of your career? What's been your favourite bit of disruptive technology?
Wow, I've been very lucky to have lots of them. I mean, the one I was just talking about with DigiPause was, everybody was building a normal point of sale machine. And I went in with the owners of the company and I said, we have to differentiate. And over a course of a weekend, we were able to build the only self-service retail point of sale machine in the market. So that if you open the front of the machine, you slide out what was the equivalent of a cookie sheet that had all the proper stuff on it, slide in the new piece, close it up, turn it back on, and it was up and running again. Everybody else in the market required somebody to either ship that machine back to the company or some rep to come out and fix it. He had to unplug all the wires. He had to do all these things. All that was very disruptive. They were able to embrace this novel idea. We went abroad to fix and build a system. We introduced it to the marketplace, and we won the Microsoft Innovator of the Year Award in 2005. And we got the wins that I was mentioning before. That's the kind of satisfaction you get from being able to look at something and work with people who have open minds and be able to drive something brand new and fresh. I've done the same thing with Via Voice, which is IBM speech recognition technology. At the time that I started with them, it was a parlor trick. People would say, oh, this is cool, but what do you need it for? I'm thrilled to see people talking to their phones when they generate text now. And you go, hey, Google, where's the nearest Domino's pizza? I sit back smiling going, 10 years ago, everybody thought I was an idiot trying to sell this stuff and get people to believe in voice recognition. Now everybody relies on it. So I have a lot of these kinds of stories. LoJack, the one I mentioned to you that I was doing back in Merrill Lynch days, I love it when I see a television show or I see a movie in which that's referred to. They go, oh, well, does the car have LoJack in it? And I just sit back going, if I wasn't involved, there's a great chance LoJack may not have gotten to where it is today, but it's woven into the fabric of society, and I get great satisfaction.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're the type of guy you like to lift up the hood, and you like to get your hands dirty and fix it. What are you're going to open the hood on Krios? What are the key things that you're looking to fix there, or what opportunities do you see?
I think coming in from the outside, my very first thing is to ensure that something that I've encountered in many businesses doesn't happen here. I have a lot of the businesses I've come and encountered early on. Let me be more explicit. They drink their own Kool-Aid. They get so excited about what they do that they lose sight of the fact that there's a customer. They wind up believing in that old adage from the old movie, the Field of Dreams mentality that says, oh, I will build it and they will come. That's not the way the world works. If they can understand what the unmet need of the customer is, and they can articulate that and stay away from believing that they're so fantastic, then they have a chance of growing. My idea of when I go in Krios is, does everybody have the single same message? Does everybody see the same customer unmet need? Is everybody looking at it in the same way? Or are we dispersed in a lot of different directions, believing we're going to take over the planet? That's not a hard thing to do as you get people to understand, but that makes a big difference in the ability for the business to grow and sustain itself.
Okay, and what do you see as potentially the key challenges in not just Krios, but maybe even the crypto space as a wider market?
Education obviously is a big one because everyone has their own misconceptions. There are so many choices out there in the crypto space. Whether I go for that coin, this coin, that's another issue as to being able to provide some degree of accurate information as well as some degree of confidence that says, okay, this isn't a fad. For the longest time, Bitcoin was a fad. Now you've got USAA accepting Bitcoin, JP Morgan. Now you have Facebook creating its own cryptocurrency. It is now becoming an evolution that people are starting to adopt. For us, it's a matter of saying, are we a significant and relevant enough player to people to see us as a sustainable opportunity? And I think that's the challenge that sets before us.
I think you just teed it off quite nicely there, because I think that is the key thing. And then back to your customer needs thing. I think if you're not adding value to customers, why would they?
Absolutely.
And I think who does it best? I'd say like Costa and Starbucks, because I see this online a lot, that you see people, they won't pay. They'll download music for free, like a 99p track, but they'll go and spend $4 or $5 on a coffee every day.
Yes.
And it's that and it's that value piece. How can you get people to appreciate that value in your product?
Absolutely. And if you can communicate that, that's probably the biggest challenge I've had. The part I've enjoyed most is being able to take complex concepts. And this is a very complicated one because there's so many dimensions to it. But if you can actually simplify it to where, and I tell this to everybody I work with, if you can explain it to your teenager at the dinner table without taking 45 minutes and without their eyes glazing over, if you can do it simple enough, then your message is right. And if the teenager can replicate that conversation to another person, then you got it right. That doesn't mean he has to be an expert, he or she. It doesn't mean that they have to understand every piece of it. You have to be able to just say, it's an alternative method of payment and et cetera, and they go, oh, I got it. Now you're there. It shouldn't take 20 minutes. If I could do it in 3.5 minutes, then I know I'm on the right spot.
And also one of the key things that's different to what's happening with Krios, obviously before it was just a ERC20 ecosystem token. We are moving to the sort of DDM model with the dividend. What do you see as pros and cons of moving to that?
The most positive thing, obviously, is it helps to build that credibility. It helps to build for the investor a greater sense that it's not just a currency play, or the idea that my value is going to go up tomorrow ridiculously, hyperbolically. They're looking at it as a potential way of having a sustainable long-term investment that actually has a rate of return on it, other than just the change of the value. I think that adds credibility to what we're doing. The negative part of it, I think, is the fact that you have this mix of investors to where that mix has almost a dueling path forward. You've got the people who are saying, I'm here for the long term. I'm happy with my dividend. I'm happy with a reasonable growth. These are the classic investor types. But then you have those early adopters in the crypto space that, oh, I want to see this go from a nickel to 7.5 cents so I can get out tomorrow and look at my rate of return. They're not looking at the investment from a long term or the performance of the underlying currency. They're just looking at, how do I make a quick buck, like a day trader? And the day trader is a different player than an investor. We're hoping, as we make it a sustainable business, as we make it credible, as we can help people understand what we do, that we'll get more of the latter, the ones who are looking at it as an investment and a player for the long term of the underlying, that they'll be there for a while.
Yeah, because I was looking at it, because obviously I'm a personal holder. I was in from the ICO early doors with Chris and the gang, and obviously seeing the whole transformation over, I think it must be 18 months now, maybe longer. And it's been phenomenal in terms of, the ups, the downs, but that's what you get with companies and stuff. But for me, the dividend seems to be the real key here in terms of I don't think people have quite twigged that if you look at I work at Mondelez Kraft Foods, as I think it's in America, and obviously you got Warren Buffett, the most famous sort of investor of all times. I think his biggest investment is in Mondelez. It's monster. He owns like 16-17%. It's not far off what not far off what he owns in Coca-Cola or one of the others and stuff. Now he lives for the dividends. That's his whole
Yes.
thing. And I worked it out that Mondelez shares are $52. On the $52, they pay out about $1 of dividend. Now, from what Dwight says, he's looking at a quarterly dividend at 2 cents, and the token currently is 4 cents. I mean, you start doing the maths on that, and
Absolutely.
it's phenomenal.
Absolutely. And going back to my days on Wall Street, one of the things that we used to do quite smoothly for a lot of investors is take your dividend and do the cost value balancing and just take the dividend and reinvest it so that your dividend actually buys more stock. And then your value actually increases because what you've actually started as your basis in your stock has started to float downward, and your number of shares has gone upward, and it really starts to pay off in the long run. Because let's face it, you and I might not find 2 cents to be worth a lot, but on a 4-cent share, if I put that 2 cents back, look what I've done with my portfolio at that point.
Yeah, you sort of read my mind a little bit because I've got my own strategy, and I'll share it with everybody. Is that obviously on the dividends, I'm going to reinvest 40% of all my dividends back and back and back, just to build. And really, everybody knows that to get the bigger Warren Buffett type portfolio is all about compounding.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's paid off for decades. I mean, I've known lots of investors that do the dollar cost value averaging, and it pays off in the long run. And at some point in time, you go back in and say, well, if my original investment, and I'll pick a number, was 3K, well, over time, I can take my 3K and look, I wound up with a free portfolio. Because now my risk has been removed. I've taken my 3K back, but the dividend keeps building for me. The stock keeps growing for me. I'm not at any risk. I look pretty astute when I go to the country club now and say, look what I've done.
And in terms of sort of like the wider strategies, it sounds like you've got you'll bring lots of ideas, one sort of expand the growth through meeting customer needs. What are the what's the best way to do it? What sort of new is it all about bringing new products in, or how's some of the growth going to sort of continue? Because obviously we have the digital track already, which has its own fundamental, and it has more use cases by the sounds of it from Dwight. Is this the areas you're going to focus on?
I kind of see myself a bit of a spoiler in some cases for Dwight, because Dwight is brilliant and Dwight has so many things he wants to do that I have to be the curmudgeon that sits back and say, let's get this done well first. Let's make sure we're really good at A before we start doing D, E, and F. And I think the role that I play as the curmudgeon is to make sure that we have sustained growth. One of the things that I've seen companies die from is they grow so successfully so fast that they can't sustain it, and they start losing customers because it's just a mess. One of the things that as a curmudgeon, you wind up pulling the reins back saying, great idea, but let's make sure that A and B are absolutely sustainable. They can continue to grow. Everything is fine with it, and the infrastructure can support it, and that we know what to do. Should the growth take off to 20%, we already know that we just bring in X number of new resources, et cetera, et cetera. I'm the more pragmatic one, and I don't want to hold him back, but I do want to make sure that scope creep doesn't kill us in the long run.
No, and that sounds like a sensible strategy in terms of do one thing right and then move on to the next thing and make sure that continued growth there. Because that's, as investors, that's what will give us confidence in the longer term picture. And then less people will sell, therefore there's less tokens available and their price will rise for everybody in that sense.
Absolutely.
So obviously, as we read the CV, imagine we're 3 years down the line. What would your CV say about your performance and contribution to the Krios project? What would be ideal for you? Best case.
I think it's very much like the CV before now. If you look back, like I use the analogy of LoJack, I've used the analogy of Via Voice, I've used the analogy of Callisto, which is another product. I've taken probably a dozen and a half of these to market. I would feel much satisfied if Krios was well understood, was pervasive in the marketplace in terms of the crypto space, as well as the spaces of the markets that we serve, the customer markets we serve, and that it was no longer viewed as, this is a fad, it's going to go away in a period of time, that somebody says, wow, this was early and they got it right on the mark and here it is to stay. Then that little paragraph on my CV would basically just say, yep, it's here. And I move on to the next thing.
And then instead of a few 100%, let's put a few 1,000% growth on it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, there's no way up from. I mean, no place to go but up from here. So we got plenty of opportunity.
And you know, if we look just only maybe 6 weeks ago, it was trading at 0.03 of a cent. Now we're up to, well, I was just looking earlier, it was nearly 4 cents. I mean, and we haven't really even started. There's more exchanges to come. There's more investors to come, and it feels like it's just the beginning.
Oh, absolutely. Once we actually launch the product, once we build the marketing platform for it, once we actually start doing the things where we can bring in the user stories, the use cases, the customer testimonials, then it's more real. Right now, I think it's a token play, meaning I come in and I make my 3 cents to 5 cents and I'm happy and I leave. When you get back in and we're doing it well, I don't think looking at the stock as much as I want to see what you're producing next. What's the next news story that comes out of you? Less important is the fact that it went from 4 cents to 4.5 cents. More importantly is we just brought in this customer that has this use case that's really exciting and they're long term, and this is what it means for this company. That's, I think, where we need to get our focus of ourselves, our employees, our customer base, our investor base, all to be looking at what we do and not so much at what our stock is performing at.
No, and I do agree there. I think in the crypto space, going back into 2017, I think people got a little bit spoiled in terms you could buy an ICO and flip it for 10, and it was just like easy money, and you know, people became millionaires overnight in crypto terms, and then obviously it all went a bit peaked on and went down. Yes. But I think people still have that mindset a little bit of wanting to, because my focus isn't on the price, it's on what the dividend pays out, and the dividend is only based on the success of the company and how much value you add to the customer.
Absolutely. And LoJack, I keep going back to that one. It's one of my earliest successes, but LoJack example, it was a penny stock. Most of the companies that I took public in the early 80s were penny stocks. I have investors who came in saying, well, I'll buy for $1 and I'll get out at $1.25. What they didn't appreciate is that my role was to go build a market. My role was to get market makers. My role was to get people excited in the long term so that you wind up having stories that you could tell and say, look, we just signed up the dealerships for all of General Motors across the U.S. Look, we just signed up the aircraft company so that all the aircrafts that they produce will have LoJack in it. Those things were actually the payoff, not whether the stock went from $1.25 to $1.75. Those people were short-sighted. And then they lost out because they got out when their stock was up 25% and they thought that was phenomenal. Well, over the course of the year, people who forgot the price value and started looking at the fact that, wow, they're really making headway. They got the dealerships, they got technology, they got toll booths that have their receivers in them so that if you drive through with a stolen vehicle, it automatically dials 911. That's when you capture their imaginations and they go, I think I'll stick with this for now. I like the story. I like the things it lets me tell at the country club or at the dinner parties. I'll stick with that. And it's less about, what did I make that 20%? Because 20% is nothing when you talk about a strong, solid growth of a company.
We've only just got to look at something like Uber, for instance.
Yes.
Only 10 years, and that flies by before you know it. And they did seen it on social media somewhere where it just had people that invested like 50 grand on what it was worth today, and it was like winning the lottery 7 or 8 times.
Absolutely, and they didn't buy it for that quick turn. Obviously, they bought it because they thought that the brand new business concept, it was a dimensional shift, and they said, well, this might work, and in fact, it changed an entire society. Both Uber and Lyft created something that 10 years ago nobody could conceive. And yet today it's woven into the fabric of society. we need to get to that point as well with what we do.
Awesome. Well, I've got to say, I really appreciate your time, Joe, coming on to talk to everybody. Hopefully, we could do another session another time and get some questions from the community. Now they've got to meet you, I'm sure they've got plenty of questions to ask you as well.
Anytime I can be of any use, reach out, let me know.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Joe, and have a lovely evening.
You too. Take care. Cheers.
I'm feeling